You know that creeping, heavy feeling of late-day burnout? We've all been there. But the data reveals there's actually something much deeper happening beneath the surface. We're talking about judges handing down harsher sentences right before lunch, doctors prescribing unnecessary antibiotics at the very end of their shifts, and disciplined, smart people making their absolute worst dietary and financial choices in the late afternoon. So, what's going on? Well, in this explainer, we're going to uncover the invisible force that is literally draining your energy every single day: decision fatigue. Every single choice you make, no matter how tiny, comes with a hidden cognitive cost. So today, we're going to map out exactly how this biological limit works, and more importantly, how you can redesign your day to make way better choices with a fraction of the effort. Let's dive in.
Section 1. The invisible daily drain and why good people make bad choices.
Okay, let's start with this truly fascinating 2011 study by researcher Shai Danziger. He looked at Israeli parole board judges. Now, these are highly trained, impartial professionals, right? Their literal job is objective assessment. And yet, the data tells a deeply human story. At the start of their day and right after their meal breaks, they granted parole about 65% of the time. But get this, the drop is absolutely shocking. Parole grants plummeted to basically 0% right before their breaks. And the key variable driving this massive shift? It wasn't the severity of the cases. Not at all. It was purely mental depletion, completely overriding their expertise.
So we really have to ask ourselves, why do highly trained experts suddenly just default to the easiest, safest option available? Well, in a judge's case, denying parole and keeping a prisoner behind bars simply maintains the status quo. It requires zero active justification, no new risk assessment, and way less cognitive effort than trying to calculate the nuanced risks of releasing someone. When your brain is just profoundly tired, it essentially stops weighing complex options and ruthlessly seeks out the path of least cognitive resistance.
And honestly, this courtroom data exposes a vulnerability that every single one of us shares. Experts estimate that we make a staggering 35,000 decisions every single day. Stop and really think about that number for a second. 35,000. Sure, that includes major life moves, but mostly it's made up of the trivial exhaustion of daily life. We agonizingly weigh which brand of toothpaste to buy, whether to reply to a Slack message right now or in 5 minutes, or what on earth to eat for breakfast. It all adds up to this incredibly overwhelming, invisible cognitive load.
The crux of the issue is that our biology simply hasn't caught up to our modern environment. Historically speaking, human beings made maybe a few dozen truly meaningful decisions a day. Where to forage for food or whether to run from that specific predator. Fast forward to today, and we're getting hit with tens of thousands of micro choices. We're effectively asking an ancient, biologically limited system to process a modern avalanche of notifications, texts, targeted ads, and logistical puzzles. The result? A brain that is just completely, utterly overwhelmed.
Moving on to Section 2, the science of depletion, taking a look at ego depletion and your brain.
So the formal scientific term for hitting this biological wall is decision fatigue. Based on Roy Baumeister's really groundbreaking research on a concept he calls ego depletion, we now understand that willpower isn't just some abstract personality trait you either have or you don't. It acts way more like a physical muscle that actually fatigues with repetition. It draws from a very finite, limited mental resource. So with every single choice you make, you are slowly draining that tank. And once it's empty, your brain struggles to weigh options and defaults to either impulsive decisions or complete total avoidance. This is exactly why we put off opening difficult emails or having tough conversations until the next morning. We literally just lack the energy to process them.
Because of this biological drain, your decision quality decreases dramatically based on the time of day. Notice the peak right around 9 a.m. For most people, this is when you're making your absolute best, most rational, forward-thinking decisions. But as you navigate the day, that notorious 3 p.m. slump hits and depletion sets in. This is exactly when people inevitably reach for a heavy coffee or a sugary snack, right? And by 9 p.m., willpower just entirely collapses. If you track your natural cortisol and glucose rhythms across the day, you see exactly why your late-night, impulse-driven food choices look completely different from your focused, disciplined breakfast choices.
Just look at the profound shift that happens in your brain's architecture by the time evening rolls around. There's basically this ongoing war between your prefrontal cortex, which is the logical planner responsible for self-control, and your limbic system. By evening, that logical planner is completely exhausted and just surrenders control. When it shuts down, your limbic system takes the wheel. And the limbic system is basically the toddler part of your brain. It doesn't care about your long-term goals or your health metrics. It's driven entirely by impulse and immediate comforting reward. So seriously, that late-night binge isn't a moral failing, it's strictly biology. Now, while scientists are still studying the exact biological mechanism behind all this, one really prominent idea is the glucose hypothesis. Some research suggests that intense mental effort actually depletes blood glucose, specifically in the brain regions involved in self-control. So this implies that a quick piece of fruit or a small snack might temporarily boost those depleted glucose levels, kind of acting like emergency fuel to help you get through a difficult project. While the exact biological pathways are still pretty heavily debated among researchers, the practical real-world effect of this afternoon cognitive crash is highly replicated across countless studies.
All right, Section 3, Traps in Modern Life. Let's look at how retail and tech intentionally exploit your tired brain.
You know, it is absolutely no accident that retail checkout lanes are strategically stocked with candy, sodas, and tabloids. Retailers know full well that your willpower is heavily depleted after you've spent 30 minutes making dozens of micro-decisions walking through their complex aisles. They're leaving you highly susceptible to impulse buys right there at the register. And we see this exact same phenomenon with massive restaurant menus that trigger overwhelming menu anxiety and decision paralysis. It even extends into the digital world, with online shopping carts frequently abandoned just because the final checkout process requires one too many choices. Even in high-stakes medical environments, when doctors prescribe unnecessary antibiotics at the end of a long shift, the root cause is very often this exact same decision fatigue.
And tech companies? Well, they've fully weaponized this biological limit to keep our attention. Think about the exact sequence of the social media endless scroll. Every single swipe requires a micro-decision. Do I stay on this post? Do I read the comments? Or do I scroll to the next one? After hundreds of rapid-fire swipes, your self-regulation entirely weakens. You find yourself just continuing to scroll even when you consciously intended to stop 10 minutes ago. It happens simply because your brain literally lacks the cognitive energy required to execute the decision to put the phone down.
We're heavily conditioned by our culture to believe that more options naturally equal more freedom and happiness, right? More is better. However, the paradox of choice, a concept popularized by psychologist Barry Schwartz, proves the exact opposite. Having a massive abundance of options actually makes us significantly less happy. It creates persistent anxiety, lingering regret over the path we didn't take, and eventual decision paralysis. By artificially limiting our choices to fewer, but much higher quality options, we can actually drastically improve our overall daily satisfaction. Which brings us to our final section, Section 4, Reclaiming Your Mental Energy, featuring high achiever frameworks to help you fight back.
There's actually a profoundly scientific reason why incredibly busy historical figures like Albert Einstein and modern leaders like Barack Obama and Steve Jobs famously wore the exact same clothes every single day. It wasn't a lack of fashion sense. Their shared philosophy was ruthlessly pragmatic: reduce trivial, low-impact choices to entirely free up cognitive resources for high-stakes decisions. By automating their wardrobe and standardizing their daily meals, they effectively guarded their brain's precious fuel, reserving it exclusively for the complex problems that actually mattered to their work.
One way you can completely bypass an exhausted brain is by utilizing a psychological tool called implementation intentions. This is basically just establishing pre-decided rules long before you actually face a temptation. For example, setting the rule, if it is 7 a.m., I will go to the gym, or if I'm offered a sugary dessert on a weekday, I will automatically decline. By doing this, you entirely remove the need to actively weigh choices in the heat of the moment. The heavy lifting of the decision was already completed earlier when your willpower tank was actually fully stocked. We can also draw some incredible inspiration from Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein's nudge theory. This research proves that when we establish positive default options in our lives, we effortlessly achieve vastly better outcomes. Consider how entire nations have revolutionized their healthcare and dramatically increased organ donor rates simply by changing the system to an opt-out model rather than an opt-in one. They made the optimal choice the default zero-energy option. On a personal level, setting up automatic paycheck transfers to a savings account leverages this exact same principle. Our tired brains will gratefully accept a smart default just to conserve energy.
Finally, we can aggressively fight back through the strategy of batching. You see, every time you switch tasks, your brain pays a heavy startup cost of focus. By grouping similar decisions together in one dedicated session, you stop decision fatigue from bleeding into every hour of your schedule. Try reviewing your emails only at 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. rather than constantly deciding whether to reply throughout the entire day. Take time to make a weekly meal plan on Sunday so you never have to agonize over what is for dinner on a brutally tired Wednesday night. Automating these areas creates massive cognitive breathing room.
So here's the bottom line. You are operating with a strictly limited supply of mental energy every single day. Treating that energy like a highly precious finite resource is the absolute key to clearer thinking, better habits, and just a less stressful life overall. So, I want you to take a close look at your own daily routine and let us know in the comments below. What is one trivial, draining decision that you are going to automate, delegate, or completely eliminate today?